Hello, everybody. My name is Karen Varian, and I would like to welcome you to Minneapolis, Minnesota. Northeast Minneapolis is where many immigrant groups, the Lebanese, the Ukrainians, the Italians, the Poles, the Slovaks, Scandinavians, and Carpatho-Rusyns settled. And today you can still see some of the pieces of the old immigrant community. Mainly here you see the bars and churches. Carpatho-Rusyns began immigrating to Minneapolis in 1877, and they settled primarily in Northeast Minneapolis. They worked in the flour mills and the railroad yards. They established churches, grocery stores, bars, and liquor stores. As with other immigrant communities, they settled close to each other. They close to their church and their work, basically within a mile of each other. They lived in what we call here in Minneapolis duplexes, two family houses, and up and a down. After World War II, many of them of these first generation, moved a little bit north into what we call the Columbia Park neighborhood, where they were building new houses. And again, up in this neighborhood, the Carpatho-Rusyns lived close together. And the red dots on here show you where the two Carpatho-Rusyn churches are and how close they are to each other. Carpatho-Rusyn immigrants of the Greek Catholic faith started arriving in Northeast Minneapolis in 1877. They came from a cluster of villages in northeastern Slovakia along the Polish border. Several of them are Rigotovka, Bekarov, Milova, and Stebnik. And you can find a list of the immigrants from St. Mary's on our Rusyn Association website, rusinmn.org. Religion is very important to the Carpatho-Rusyns, and one of the first things they wanted to do as a community is to establish churches. In the 1800s, in 1884, the first divine liturgy, the first Greek Catholic divine liturgy, was celebrated in a private home in Northeast Minneapolis by Father John Walensky of Shenandoah, Pennsylvania. Between 1884 and 1888, Father Walensky visits numerous times and celebrates divine liturgy. He urges people, the local people, to organize a parish where a resident pastor would serve. Then in 1887, the Carpatho-Rusyn community had grown to approximately 80 individuals. The property was purchased on 17th and 5th Street Northeast, Minneapolis, and a building was erected. St. Mary's Greek Catholic Church was dedicated to the protection of the Most Holy Theotokos in the spring of 1889. In 1889, St. Mary's parishioners wrote to the bishop of their former diocese of Prussia, in what is now Slovakia, and they requested a permanent priest. Father Alexis Toth arrived in Minneapolis in November of 1889. In 1891, Father Toth and most of the members of St. Mary's entered into communion with the Russian Orthodox Church. These are the years 1900 to 1910. New waves of Carpatho-Rusyn immigrants began moving to Northeast Minneapolis, either directly from the Austro-Hungarian Empire or from New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And these new waves were from a larger part, a broader area of Carpatho-Rusyn homeland. In 1902, at the request of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Pope of Rome sent Father Alexandra Hodobi from the Eparchy of Prussia to visit the Greek Catholic communities in the United States. Then in 1906, Father Hodobi visits Archbishop Ireland concerning the Greek Catholics of the region. At the recommendation of Father Hodobi, and with support from Archbishop Ireland, along with 3 years of financial support from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it is agreed to formally establish a Greek Catholic parish in Minneapolis. So in 1906, a wooden church was built. It was purchased from a nearby Holy Cross Polish Catholic church and moved to 22nd and 3rd Street Northeast. In November of that year, St. John the Baptist Greek Catholic Church is established. So what is the importance of these Carpatho-Rusyn churches? Well, St. Alexis of Wilkes-Barre. Father Alexis Toth served as the first Greek Catholic priest at St. Mary's. Bishop John Ireland, the Roman Catholic bishop of the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis, refused to permit Toth to serve as a priest in Minneapolis because he was a widower. Then in 1892, Father Toth was the first priest in the United States to convert to Orthodoxy, along with 361 of his parishioners. And he was responsible for the conversions of approximately 20,000 Eastern Rite Catholics to the Russian Orthodox Church, which contributed to the growth of Eastern Orthodoxy in the United States and eventually the establishment of the Orthodox Church in America, known as the OCA. And he was canonized by the Orthodox Church in 1994. Metropolitan Archbishop Stephen Kosciuszko. He was born in 1950 in Minneapolis to Carpatho-Rusyn immigrant parents and attended St. John the Baptist Byzantine Catholic Church. As with many people, his family lived across the street from St. John's Church. In 1956, he was ordained as a bishop. And in 1969, Bishop Kosciuszko, Bishop of Pittsburgh, was elevated to Archbishop and installed as the first metropolitan in the history of the Carpatho-Rusyn people. In 1986, Archbishop Kosciuszko, together with the bishops of the Byzantine-Ruthenian Metropolitan Province, initiated the causes for the canonization of 3 bishops of Subcarpathian Rus, who had been martyred or suffered as confessors of the faith under the Soviet regime. These were Bishop Theodore Rumza, Archieparch of Mukachevo, Bishop Paul Peter Goydich, Eparch of Prešov, and Bishop Basil Hopko, Auxiliary Bishop of Prešov. All 3 were subsequently beatified. Okay, we'll talk about the churches now. St. Mary's Orthodox Cathedral, Orthodox Church in America. The first wooden church was built in 1889 and it burned in 1904. A new church was built in 1905 and this church still stands today. And this church was designed in a popular Russian style of the period. The new structure was based on the elevation of the Cross Cathedral in Omsk, Siberia. The architect was Victor Cordella, who designed many churches in Minnesota. The interior of St. Mary's has gone through a phase of interior restoration, the most recent in 2018. You can check out a virtual tour of the church on St. Mary's Orthodox Cathedral website. St. Mary's interior, the dome. The dome is supported on 4 corners with icons of the 4 evangelists. Above these are icons of the first 4 saints of North America: St. Herman of Alaska, St. Innocent, Apostle to America, St. Juvenali, Priest Martyr of Alaska, and St. Peter the Aleut. 4 additional icons portray Christ's trial, the baptism of Kievan Rus, Christ's nativity, and Christ teaching the Beatitudes. Between the windows in the dome are the heavenly hosts of angels. The large crystal chandelier made in Slovakia is suspended in the dome, like the sun in the sky, above the floor, and its 4 corners like the earth. The iconostas. At the front of the church is a wall of icons, and in the middle of the iconostas are the holy doors. It is beneath an icon of the mystical supper, and this is the original iconostas from the church that was built in 1905. On the holy doors are icons of the 4 evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the left of the holy doors is an icon of the Virgin Mary holding the infant Christ. And to the right is an icon of Christ. The 2 tiers of icons above present events in Christ's life. The altar. The apse itself is filled with the icon of the Virgin Mary with her arms open, raised in prayer. The infant Christ blesses. Above the altar is the icon not made by human hands. Christ is flanked by the Virgin Mary and St. John the Baptist. Beneath them are icons of two great bishops, John Chrysostom and Basil the Great. And beneath them and spanning the apse is the Annunciation, the Archangel Gabriel speaking to the Virgin Mary. On the north wall are icons of the Archangel Gabriel and 8 female saints, including early ancestors, martyrs, rulers, and fools for Christ. And on the south wall are icons of the Archangel Michael and 8 male saints, including prophets, monks, a physician, and 2 saints who ministered at St. Mary's, St. Tikhon and St. Alexis. St. Mary's Russian Orthodox Cemetery. I know many genealogists like to visit cemeteries, so this may be of some interest to you. Actually, if you go to find a grave, you'll see that many graves are identified. Those are all the pink dots on there. And there are approximately 2,400 graves identified. In this example, I gave you William Varian, just because the last name Varian. But no, a special interest of this is he was initially buried in St. Peter and Paul Cemetery on 75th and Central. There was a small Orthodox church in Columbia Heights, which is the first tier suburb just north of our Northeast community. And this church, St. Peter and Paul, when it closed and the cemetery property was sold, the graves were moved here to St. Mary's. Of interest is a genealogy road trip on YouTube. It's called My Favorite Minneapolis Cemetery. The woman who recently did this video is the one who also identified all these graves in here. Now we move on to St. John the Baptist, Byzantine Catholic Church. The original church, which was moved to the property in 1906, and the rectory built in 1907. And the current church was built in 1927. This church was established by new waves of Carpatho-Rusyn immigrants who came between 1891 and 1900. Unlike St. Mary's, these immigrants came up from a variety of Carpatho-Rusyn villages in northeastern Slovakia, southern Poland, and western Ukraine. And at this time, the Roman Catholic Church was more accepting of Byzantine Catholics because after Father Toth and other Byzantine Catholic churches converted to Orthodoxy, the Catholic Church realized they were losing these Catholics. And you can find a list of immigrants from St. John's and their village of origin on our Rusyn Association website, rusinmn.org, under genealogy. This is a picture of the interior in St. John's. And you can see in 1962, it looked very much like a Roman Catholic church. When the Byzantine Catholic churches were established, many of them were built in the Roman Catholic design. One reason was so that they would be more accepted by the Roman Catholic Church. In 1958, Ukrainian iconographer Svetoslav Hordinsky is commissioned to write icons for the sanctuary, as well as those that will later become the main icons in the icon screen. Those that become, before the icon screen was created, you see right now there's 2 icons, one on the left and one on the right. There was another one on the left and another one on the right that became part of the iconostas. In 1992, following directives of the Second Vatican Council, the interior of St. John's was remodeled to conform to the spiritual and theological traditions of the Byzantine Catholic Church. So this is when the iconostas was installed. I'm going to go from left to right here and talk about those on the iconostas. To the left of the iconostas itself is St. Nicholas. He's the patron saint of the Carpatho-Rusyns. And you will usually, in most Byzantine Catholic churches and Orthodox churches started by the Rusyns, you will see him on the left side there. Next, you see St. Michael the Archangel, and then the Mother of God. Then on the royal doors, which is in the middle there, is the Annunciation. And above those royal doors is the Communion of the Apostles. You'll see this icon, Communion of the Apostles, or the Last Supper, usually above the doors. Then we'll go on to Christ, and then St. Lawrence the Archdeacon. Usually there is a archdeacon on this icon panel because it's the deacon's door where the deacons go in and out during the liturgy. Then on the right wall there is St. John the Baptist, from which St. John's was named after. And that's also traditional, as you'll see the patron saint of the church on the right. Try to do a little bit of close-up pictures here. Above the altar, you see Mary, the Mother of God, Christ, and St. John the Baptist. And then I tried to take a picture of above the royal doors where you see the Communion of the Apostles. And of course, in the middle is during a divine liturgy. As in most churches, you'll see the stained glass windows, and people would donate money for these windows. And here you see, I'll point out the names: George Mackle and family, Michael Fedorak and family, Vaso Lakotis and family, John Beda and family, Anna Skovron, Andrew Skovron, and Eva Beely. These are typical Carpatho-Rusyn names. If you're interested in doing some research, you may want to visit the Immigration History and Research Center archives at the University of Minnesota. The Immigration History Research Center archives is an archive and library for the study of immigration, ethnicity, and race. They select sources documenting a broad range of immigrant and refugee experiences, and they strive to connect archives to today's experiences. Next year, CGSI will be doing a presentation that will focus primarily on using archives, but I wanted to give you a little example here of some of the archival material related to Carpatho-Rusyns that you will see in paper. These are not digitalized, so the only place you can see these is at the University of Minnesota Immigration History Research Center archives. When I did a search, I found 19 records that came up. I have been there and looked at these records, and these are some of the pictures that I took. And you'll see entries into lodge books, so you'll see their names and how much money they gave. And actually on the top, it gives you, I believe that's a lodge book too, and it'll say the religion, and it says the village they are from too. Then you see bank notes where people have sent money back to their relatives in the old country. And then there's just a postcard here from a relative that wrote to them. So you can see how they wrote in their own language. If you plan on visiting, you must make an appointment. They need time to get out the boxes that you need to review. So that's real important. Thanks for joining us on this tour. I hope to see you in Minneapolis. Our Rusyn Association represents Rusyns in the state of Minnesota and western Wisconsin. Please visit us at our website at rusinmn.org. And our email address is rusinmn@gmail.com. Thanks.